Welcome. Tonight's story is real, emotional, and meant to be heard quietly. One gentle question: what time is it where you are right now? Story 1. The secret my husband kept in our attic. I found the letters on a Tuesday. It's funny how the world can split open on the most ordinary of days. My name is Sarah, and for 12 years, I believed my marriage to David was a fortress. It wasn't until I climbed into the dusty, forgotten space above our heads that I learned some fortresses are built to keep secrets in, not dangers out. That morning had been like any other. The scent of burnt toast, the frantic search for a missing soccer cleat, the gentle hum of the coffee macaron symphony of suburban normalcy. David kissed my cheek, his lips dry and quick as he grabbed his briefcase. "Big merger meeting today," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. I'd chalked it up to stress. He'd been distant, but what married couple with 2 kids, a mortgage, and a creeping sense of middle-aged fatigue isn't? The cracks were there if I'd chosen to see them. The way he'd started password protecting his phone for work, the hushed phone calls he'd end when I entered the room, explaining them away as client confidentiality. The most unsettling detail was a new one. The previous weekend, while cleaning out his car, I'd found a receipt for a large, expensive bouquet from a florist downtown. The date was our anniversary. He'd given me a modest potted orchid. When I'd teasingly held up the receipt, he'd flushed, snatched it, and muttered something about it being a gift for his secretary who was leaving. I'd let it go. You learn to let things go after a decade together. You smooth over the rough patches for the sake of peace. That Tuesday, the peace demanded a different sacrifice. A leak had developed in the ceiling of our daughter Lily's room, a dark, spreading stain on the butterfly-patterned wallpaper. David was working late again. So with a sigh, I pulled down the folding attic stairs, the groan of the springs a protest in the quiet house. The air was thick and still, smelling of old wood and insulation. The single, bare bulb cast long, dancing shadows. I found the leak's source: a cracked tile on the far side end was about to retreat when my foot brushed against something that wasn't a box of Christmas ornaments or old baby clothes. It was a small, cedar-stained chest, the kind you'd buy at a craft fair. It was tucked behind the insulation, deliberately hidden. My heart did a funny little stutter. A part of me, the part that valued our fragile peace, whispered to leave it. But the other part, the part that had been quietly collecting those subtle cracks like evidence, reached for the latch. It was unlocked. Inside, there were no old love letters from an ex-girlfriend, no stash of money, nothing so simple. There were documents, neat, clinical, and devastating. A birth certificate for a child, a boy born 5 years ago. The father's name, David Michael Ellis. The mother's name, Clara. A stack of printed photos rested beneath it. David, looking younger, happier than I'd seen him in years, holding a newborn in a hospital room. David pushing a toddler on a swing. David with his arm around a smiling, dark-haired woman in a park I didn't recognize. There were bank statements showing regular, substantial transfers to an account in Clara's name. And at the very bottom, a single, creased ultrasound image dated just 2 months ago. The word "sister" was written in David's familiar, looping script in the corner. The physical sensation was like being plunged into ice water. My ears roared. I couldn't feel my fingers clutching the ultrasound. I sat there on the rough plywood floor, surrounded by the ghost of my own life, the proof of another one flourishing in its shadow. The mundanity of the attic's pink fiberglass insulation, the dusty beam of light, the distant sound of a lawnmower made the betrayal feel both hyper-real and impossible. This was the man who made me tea when I had a cold, who taught our son to ride a bike, who slept beside me every night. And he was also a stranger who had a 5-year-old son and a pregnant girlfriend. I want to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever had a gut feeling, a deep primal knowing that something was wrong, but you chose to explain it away? You tell yourself you're being paranoid, hormonal, insecure. You paper over the unease with logic and loyalty because the alternative is too terrifying to face. I lived in that space of willful ignorance for months, but once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. It rewrites every memory, every kind word, every touch. What's the one piece of evidence you could never explain away? I didn't confront him that night. I carefully placed everything back in the chest exactly as I found it. I was an archaeologist of my own ruin. I went through the motions: homework, dinner, bath time, stories. I watched David help our son, Jake, with his math worksheet, his face the picture of devoted fatherhood. The cognitive dissonance was nauseating. Which father was he? The one here or the one in the park with his other son? That night in bed, his back to me, I stared at the ceiling, same ceiling that hid his secret world, and felt a seismic shift within me. The Sarah who trusted was gone. In her place was a detective, cold and clear-eyed. The next few days were a blur of silent investigation. I hired a private investigator with money from our joint savings, a bitter irony that wasn't lost on me. The report confirmed everything and added horrifying detail. Clara lived 40 minutes away in a townhouse David was paying for. Their son's name was Leo. David visited them every Thursday, his late client meetings, and every other Saturday, his golf games. He'd been with Clara for 6 years. Our son Jake was 7. He had started this double life when Jake was just a toddler. The investigator provided addresses, routines, photos of them grocery shopping, a happy, mundane family unit. My own family felt like the imitation, the tired, worn-out copy. A strange calm settled over me. It was the calm of absolute certainty. I met with a lawyer. I began quietly moving funds. I documented everything. I was building my lifeboat while still pretending to sleep in the bed on the sinking ship. The confrontation came not with a bang, but with a quiet statement. It was a week later, after the kids were in bed. We were in the living room, the blue light of the television flickering over us. I muted it. "David," I said, my voice unnervingly steady, "we need to talk about Leo and Clara." The color drained from his face so completely I thought he might faint. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw a carousel of emotions spin: shock, fear, guilt, and then a pathetic, desperate hope. "Sarah, it's not what you think," he began, the words limp and practiced. "Don't," I cut him off. "Don't insult us both. The chest in the attic, the birth certificate, the ultrasound for Leo's sister, I know everything." He crumpled, not into tears, but into a deflated heap on the couch. He confessed in a monotone, as if he'd been rehearsing this speech for years. He met her at a work conference. It just happened. He never meant for it to go this far. He loved us, he loved the kids, he was trapped, he was going to end it. The cliches fell from his lips like stones. I listened, feeling nothing but a vast, hollow emptiness. The man before me was suddenly small, pathetic. And here is where I did something that surprises even me. In that moment of his utter defeat, a perverse sense of power emerged. I saw a flicker of false hope. He thought this was the rock bottom from which we might somehow rebuild. He reached for my hand. "I'll end it. I'll cut all ties. We can go to therapy. For the kids, Sarah, please." I looked at his hand, the hand that had held another woman, that had held his other child, and I felt a surge of something clean and sharp: clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It was a parallel life, meticulously constructed and maintained for years. He had not just betrayed me, he had fractured time itself, dividing his fatherhood, his resources, his self between two homes. He had made me an unwitting participant in a lie that had stolen years of my authentic life. "Oh," I said, my voice still quiet, final. "There is no way to rebuild. You have 2 children with me and 2 with her. You have 2 families. You don't get to choose one now and pretend the other doesn't exist. That's not how this works." I laid out my terms, cold and precise, the product of my days of planning. He would move out. We would tell the children an age-appropriate version of the truth, one that didn't vilify him but didn't sanitize his actions either. We would proceed with a mediated divorce. He would continue his financial support of both households. This was not a negotiation. It was the new reality, the one he had built, and I was simply reading the blueprint. The climax wasn't a screaming match. It was the silent, devastating moment he realized I was not going to fight for him. I was not going to cry, beg, or compete with Clara. I was simply leaving the arena he had created. The fight drained from him, replaced by a dawning horror at the practical, sprawling mess of his own making. He was no longer a man caught between 2 loves. He was a man facing the logistical and emotional nightmare of 2 separate lives, fully exposed. The fantasy was over. The divorce is final now. Some days are a struggle, a hurricane of grief and logistics. Other days are quiet, and in that quiet I find a strength I never knew I had. David is an involved, if somewhat harried, father to all four of his children. We co-parent with a stiff, business-like civility. I heard Clara had the baby girl. I never met her. I don't plan to. My life is smaller now, but it is authentically mine. There is no ghost in the attic, no second life humming in the background. Sometimes when I tuck Jake and Lily into bed in the house I kept, I look at their faces and feel a sorrow so deep it's like a physical ache for the family they lost, for the innocent stolen. But I also feel a fierce, unshakable love. We are building something new from the rubble, something honest. And the hardest lesson I learned is this. Sometimes, forgiveness isn't about letting the other person back in. It's about letting yourself out of the prison of their lie. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's one I never thought I'd tell, but sharing it feels like a part of healing. If you've ever faced a betrayal that redefined your world, I see you. Your feelings are valid. Please share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. This community can be such a source of strength. If this story resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe for more real, raw journeys of emotional survival. You are not alone. Story 2. The day my husband's secret life exploded. I found the ring in a box of old Christmas ornaments, the kind of cheap, gaudy thing you'd win from a carnival game. A heart-shaped emerald set in tarnished silver. It was tucked beneath a tangled string of lights, and holding it in my palm, I felt the floor of our quiet suburban home tilt beneath me, because I'd seen this ring before. Not in my house, but in a photograph, tucked into the corner of a frame on my husband David's desk at work. A photo, he said, was of his cousin's kid. The child in that picture, a little girl with David's exact smile, was wearing this ring on a chain around her neck. My name is Sarah. For 12 years, my life was a study in comfortable, predictable normalcy. I'd get up at 6, make the coffee while David showered, pack our lunches side by side, High's turkey on rye. My salad and Wedge share a brief, sleepy kiss at the door before heading to our separate jobs. Our evenings were a gentle rhythm of dinner, maybe a show, a conversation about the gutters or our plans for the weekend. We were trying for a baby, a process that had become less about passion and more about calendars and basal temperatures, a shared project that was starting to feel like a quiet, unspoken strain. But it was our strain, our quiet life. I believed in its solidity, in the man I'd married, a man who remembered to put the toilet seat down and called his mother every Sunday. The cracks, if they were there, were microscopic. The way he'd sometimes stare at his phone with a faint, unreadable smile before locking it quickly. The business trip to a city 3 hours away that he'd taken last month, returning with no new client, just a strange, distant exhaustion. I'd chalked it up to work stress, to the pressure of our silent, growing disappointment each month when the test was negative. I told myself I was being paranoid, that building a life required trust, not suspicion. So tell me, have you ever had a piece of evidence fall into your hands? Something so small and so devastating that your entire world just stopped making sound? Where the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, it all just vanishes and you're left in this terrifying, silent bubble with the truth. That ring was my bubble. I didn't confront him. Not then. Instead, I became a ghost in my own home. I waited until he was asleep that night, his breathing deep, and even the breathing of a man with, I now suspected, a completely clear conscience. I took his phone from the charger. The password was our anniversary, a detail that felt like a cruel joke. I went straight to his email, an archive of our domestic life, confirmations for lawn care, receipts from Home Depot. But then I found a second email account, auto-logged in. The username was a combination of his childhood dog's name and numbers I didn't recognize. The inbox was sparse, but there was one thread. The subject line was school play pics. It was from an address labeled K. The preview text read, "She was amazing. Wish you could have been there. We miss you." The date was the weekend of his business trip. My hands were so cold they were clumsy. I opened it. There were 3 attachments. I clicked the first. It was a photograph of a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, on a stage in a mouse costume. Her face was painted with whiskers, her smile brilliant and gap-toothed. She was the spitting image of David at that age. I knew because I'd seen the albums at his mother's house. The second photo was of the same girl, out of costume, hugging a woman. The woman had kind eyes and was holding a bouquet of grocery store flowers. And there, on a chain around the little girl's neck, was the carnival ring. The third photo was a selfie. David in a park I didn't recognize, his arms around both the woman and the girl. He was smiling a smile I hadn't seen in years, burdened, radiant, completely present. The date stamp was from 2 years ago. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I scrolled through the sent folder. Short, careful replies from David. She looks beautiful. Tell her I am so proud. Money sent for the costume. I'll try for the next one. Thinking of you both. Thank you for understanding. Understanding what? Understanding that he had a wife at home. Understanding that he was living a double life. I felt a physical nausea, a hot cold wave that started in my stomach and radiated out to my fingertips. I carefully placed the phone back on the charger. I went to the guest room, laid down on the bed, and stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. That image of his joyful, secret face burned onto the back of my eyelids. The next week was a performance of such staggering normalcy I felt like I deserved an Oscar. I made the coffee. I packed the lunches. I smiled. Inside, I was a raw, screaming nerve. I hired a private investigator. It felt like a cliché from a bad movie, but I had no other map for this foreign territory. The report came back in 48 hours. His name was David, but to them, he was Dave. He had a daughter, Chloe, age 8. He had been in a relationship with her mother, Karen, for 10 years. They lived in a town 45 minutes away. David visited every other weekend and every Wednesday evening. He paid their rent. He was listed as the father on Chloe's birth certificate. The pie included photos. David pushing Chloe on a swing. David carrying groceries into their apartment. David, Karen, and Chloe leaving a pizza place. A perfect, secret little family unit. I carried this dossier of my own annihilation in my purse. For a few days, there was a strange, false clarity. The mystery was solved. The pain had a shape, a name, an address. I told myself I would be strong, I would be cold, I would hire a lawyer and take him for everything. I envisioned the confrontation, my voice steady as I laid out the evidence, watching his face crumble. I felt a surge of bitter, empowering rage. It was a lifeline. I chose a Wednesday. I knew he'd be at their place. I waited in my car down the street from the apartment complex the pie had identified. It was a modest, friendly-looking place with bikes in the racks and plastic slides in a small playground. At 7:15 p.m., I saw his car pull in. My heart hammered against my ribs. He got out, but he didn't go inside. He opened the back door and pulled out a large, clumsily wrapped present. As he walked toward the building's entrance, the door burst open. Chloe came running out, a blur of pink leggings and flying hair. She launched herself at him, and he dropped the present to catch her, swinging her up into his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. He held her like she was the most precious thing in the world, his whole body curving around her smallness. I saw his face. It was the face from the photo. It was a face I realized, with a sinking, devastating clarity I had not seen directed at me in a very, very long time. I drove home in a trance. The empowering rage was gone, replaced by a hollow, howling grief. He came home at 11, smelling of cold air and cheap pizza. "Long meeting," he said, dropping his keys in the bowl. I was sitting at the kitchen table, the pies folder and the carnival ring in front of me. "How was Chloe's school play?" I asked. My voice was calm, flat. It didn't sound like my own. He froze, halfway out of his coat. The color drained from his face. "What? The mouse costume was adorable. She really does have your smile." He stared at the folder. His shoulders slumped, all the air going out of him at once. It wasn't the dramatic collapse I'd imagined. It was a slow, terrible deflation. "Sarah," he whispered. 8 years, David. You have an 8-year-old daughter." The words felt like glass in my mouth. "You have a whole other family, for our entire marriage." Was any of this real? He sank into the chair opposite me, his head in his hands. The confession spilled out in a choked, monotone flood. He'd met Karen in college a year before he met me. It was on and off, intense but unstable. When she got pregnant, she decided to keep it. He was scared. He met me and I was stable, grounded, the right kind of life. He married me. But he never left them. He couldn't, he said. He loved his daughter. He cared for Karen. He'd been trapped trying to balance two worlds, too cowardly to choose or to come clean. Choose. I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping. You chose every day. You chose to lie to me. You chose to miss our life to live that one. You chose to let me blame my own body for our empty house while you had a child 45 minutes away. I picked up the carnival ring. You gave her this, a token from her dad. What did you ever give me? A lie, a shadow of a husband. He cried then, real shaking sobs. He begged. He said he would end it. He would do anything. He loved me. He was just confused. He was a coward. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back as if burned. Do not touch me, I said, my voice finally breaking. You don't get to talk about love. You don't get to be confused. You built a life with me on a foundation of quicksand. You made me the other woman in my own marriage. I stood up, my legs shaky. You will sleep in the guest room. Tomorrow you will call a lawyer. You will tell them everything. And you will move out to wherever you want, here or there, but you will not stay here with me. The climax wasn't a scream. It was that silence after my words, thick and final. It was the look in his eyes, not just guilt, but a dawning realization that the bridge was burned, that the careful double life was over, and he had lost both sides of it forever. It was the understanding that my love, which he had taken for granted as a permanent, forgiving fixture, had just turned to stone. He moved out the next week. The divorce was a brutal, logistical unraveling of a life that was already a fiction. I heard through mutual friends that he moved in with Karen and Chloe, trying to make a go of the real family he'd always had on the side. I don't know if it worked. I sold the house. I moved to a small apartment near the city. Some days the grief is a physical weight. Other days there's a fragile, terrifying peace. The ring is gone. I threw it into a river. But sometimes, in the dead quiet of my new, singular life, I can still feel its cheap, metallic ghost in the palm of my hand, the first and final piece of a truth that shattered the woman I was, leaving someone I don't yet recognize to slowly pick up the pieces. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's one of the hardest things I've ever shared. If you've ever faced a betrayal that rewired your understanding of reality, or if you've had to rebuild from the ground up, I'd be so grateful if you'd share your own experiences in the comments below. Let's be a community for each other. And if this resonated with you, please consider liking the video and subscribing for more real, raw stories about love, survival, and the complicated truth of human relationships. Story 3. The message in his childhood closet. I found the letter 6 months after my father died, and 3 days before I was supposed to marry the man I thought knew everything about me. My name is Chloe, and the life I was about to step into was built on a foundation of sand I never even knew existed. I was sitting on the floor of my old bedroom at my mom's house, surrounded by dusty boxes of high school yearbooks and dried-up prom corsages, looking for my grandmother's pearl earrings, me something old. The air smelled like lemon polish and attic, a smell that always made me feel 10 years old again. I pulled out a plastic bin marked Chloe's keepsakes in my mother's neat script, expecting report cards and faded friendship bracelets. Instead, nestled on top of a stack of my own childish drawings, was a sealed, yellowing envelope with my name on it. Not in my mother's handwriting, in my father's. My life with Ben felt like a slow, sweet sunrise after a long night. We met at a charity run, both of us wheezing at the water station, more interested in the free bananas than our finished times. He was an architect, all clean lines and quiet confidence with a smile that felt like a physical warmth. I was a graphic designer, a bit more chaotic, my world built in color and emotion. We balanced each other. For 4 years, we built a life of inside jokes, Sunday morning pancakes, and a shared, profound love for his family dog, a shaggy mutt named Gus. His parents, Richard and Linda, had welcomed me with an almost overwhelming openness. They treated me like the daughter they'd never had, filling a quiet space in my heart that had always ached a little since my own dad passed. He'd been a kind, distant man, a history professor who lived more in the past than the present. Our relationship was one of gentle, respectful affection, but not deep confidences. His death from a sudden stroke had been a shock of grief, but not the earth-shattering kind. Or so I thought. The morning of the day I found the letter, Ben and I had been at his parents' house for final wedding planning. Linda was fussing over floral arrangements, her iPad glowing with spreadsheets. Richard was his usual jovial self, telling a long, meandering story about a client from the 90s. It was all perfectly normal. But as I was leaving, Linda hugged me a little too tightly, her eyes glistening. "You're the best thing that ever happened to our boy," Shed whispered, her voice thick. At the time, Id just thought it was maternal emotion. Richard had clapped Ben on the shoulder and said, "You take care of her, son. You remember what's important." Ben had nodded, a serious look in his eyes that I mistook for pre-wedding gravity. There was a weight to their words that I felt but didn't understand, a gravity that seemed to pull just beneath the surface of our happy chatter. Driving away, Id pushed the feeling aside, attributing it to my own pre-wedding jitters and the lingering grief of planning a day my father wouldn't see. Have you ever had a moment where your entire understanding of someone Somyeon you loved deeply just shattered? Not from a loud fight or a discovered text, but from a single, quiet piece of paper that rewrote your entire shared history. Back on the floor of my childhood bedroom, my hands were trembling. The envelope felt brittle. I turned it over. No stamp, just for Chloe to be open when you're truly happy. It was dated just 2 weeks before he died. My heart was a frantic bird in my chest, truly happy. Wasn't I? I was about to marry Ben. I was surrounded by love. With a deep breath that did nothing to steady me, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of his familiar university letterhead. "My dearest Chloe, if you're reading this, it means you've found a happiness that feels solid and real. That is all I have ever wanted for you. And because you have that, you are now strong enough to bear a truth I was too cowardly to tell you while I lived. The weight of it has been my constant companion for 28 years. Your mother, Alina, is the love of my life. You know that. But before we met, she was married to another man. A man named Richard. Their marriage was brief, tumultuous, and ended before you were born. You were conceived during a period of separation, a final, painful attempt at reconciliation. When she discovered she was pregnant, Richard wanted nothing to do with it. He wanted a clean break. He signed away all parental rights without a second thought. I had loved your mother as a friend for years. When she came to me, terrified and alone, I offered to marry her, to give you my name, to be your father in every way that mattered. We moved across the state. We started a new life. We loved you, Chloe. That love was and is utterly real. You are my daughter, but Richard, he built a new life too. He remarried a wonderful woman named Linda. They had a son, a boy named Ben. I have watched from afar, sick with this secret, as you and Ben found each other. The cosmic cruelty of it is a burden I cannot describe. I have met him. He is a good man. He is not to blame for the sins of his father, but you must know the truth before you legally bind your life to his. You and Ben are half-siblings. I am so sorry for the deception, for this letter, for the pain it will cause. Please forgive a frightened old man who loved his daughter too much to risk losing her. With all the love in my heart, Dad. The words didn't compute at first. They were just black marks on a page. Then they rearranged themselves into meanings, and the meanings into a reality so horrific my mind simply recoiled. A high-pitched whine started in my ears. The room tilted. Half-siblings. Ben Richard. My father Wasson. The man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike, who quietly paid for my art degree, had carried this. The man Id called Dad for 28 years had held this truth while he hugged me goodbye for college, while he walked me down the aisle at my cousin's wedding, while he lay dying in a hospital bed. I felt a violent physical nausea. I scrambled to the bathroom and was sick, my body expelling the truth as my mind tried to grasp it. What followed was a blur of cold, detached planning. I called Ben and told him I had a migraine, that I was staying at my mom's. My voice sounded alien, flat and far away. He, sweet, oblivious Ben, told me to rest, that he'd handle the final caterer call. The kindness in his voice was a physical blow. I then called my mother. I found Dad's letter, I said, my tone leaving no room for pretense. The silence on the other end was a confession in itself. Then a shattered sob. "Come home, Chloe, please." I confronted her in the very living room where Ben and I had watched movies with his parents. She looked small and ancient, the letter lying on the coffee table between us like a live grenade. "Why?" was the only word I could manage. The story tumbled out, a sad, common tale of a young, bad marriage, a pregnancy that was an anchor, not a blessing, and a kind, love-struck friend offering a lifeline. Your father Jamish was your father, she pleaded, tears streaming. In every way that counts. He wanted to tell you when you turned 18, but then you were applying to colleges, and then you met Ben and he just couldn't. He saw how you looked at Ben. He saw how Richard and Linda adored you. He thought he was protecting your happiness. He was protecting himself. I screamed, the first crack in my numb shell. And you let me fall in love with my brother. The word hung in the air, ugly and impossible. She crumpled. I didn't know who Ben was until you'd been dating for a year. By then you were in love. James was dying. What was I supposed to do? Rip your world apart twice? For a wild, grief-stricken moment, I considered the unthinkable. Could I just not tell Ben? Could I bury this with my father? We weren't raised together. We shared blood, but no history. The law in our state didn't prohibit our marriage. Maybe we could just be. The thought was seductive and monstrous. I pictured our wedding, my mother's strained smile, Richard's unknowing toast to his son and his daughter. I pictured future children and the secret that would poison their very origin. I looked at my mother, broken by her own decades-long secret, and I knew. Secrets like this are a cancer. They don't stay buried. They eat you from the inside out until there's nothing left but the hollow where your truth should have been. 2 days before the wedding, I asked Ben to meet me at the park where he'd proposed. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, all golden light and sharp shadows. He came with a hopeful smile, thinking I was feeling better. Gus was with him, bounding through the leaves. The normalcy of it was excruciating. We walked in silence for a bit, our hands brushing. I could feel the letter in my jacket pocket, a square of doom. Ben, I started, my voice breaking immediately. I need to tell you something. And before I do, you need to know that I love you. More than I have ever loved anyone. What I'm about to say, it changes everything. But my love for you is the one true thing in the middle of this nightmare. His smile faded, replaced by confused concern. Chloe, you're scaring me. I led him to a bench. I took out the letter. My father left this for me. I found it 3 days ago. I handed it to him. You need to read it. I watched his face as he read. I saw the confusion, then the dawning comprehension, then the slow, terrible collapse of his features. His skin went gray. His hands shook so violently the paper rattled. When he finished, he stared straight ahead, unseeing. The longest minute of my life passed. Then he said very quietly, my father, not a question. A statement of horrific understanding. All those times he never said a word. He welcomed you into our home. A terrible, ragged sound escaped him, part sob, part laugh. He gave a toast at our engagement party. He turned to look at me, his eyes pools of utter devastation. Chloe, are we? I could only nod, tears streaming silently down my face. He stood up abruptly, pacing away, his hands gripping his hair. Gus whined, sensing the distress. Ben turned back, his expression shifting from pain to a furious, incandescent rage. How could they, all of them? Your parents, my dad, they let this happen. They watched us. They encouraged us. His anger was a fire, and for a second I was grateful for it. It was better than the suffocating grief. But then it sputtered and died, leaving only ashes. He sank to his knees on the path, right there in the dirt and leaves, not crying, just broken. I went to him, my instinct to comfort him overwhelming, but I stopped myself before I touched him. The thought of our physical contact, once my greatest comfort, now felt wrong. That pause, that moment of withheld touch, was the real end of us. We sat on that bench for hours as the sun set. We talked in shattered, practical fragments. The wedding was off. Obviously, what to tell people. Family discovery, an insurmountable obstacle. The truth was too catastrophic to share. We would need to call everyone. We would need to return gifts. We discussed it like a project, a disaster to be managed, because to discuss what it meant for us was impossible. The future we had painted, the house, the kids, the growing old toadster vanished, not with a bang, but with the rustle of a single piece of paper. Finally, in the dark, he said, I have to go see my father. His voice was cold. I just nodded. He stood up. He looked at me, a long, searching look that took in the woman he loved, his fiancée, his almost wife, his sister. Goodbye, Chloe, he whispered. And he walked away, Gus trailing faithfully behind him, leaving me alone on the bench in the cold, dark park. That was 8 months ago. The wedding was canceled. The story we gave was vague, citing an unresolvable family matter. Mutual friends picked sides in the quiet, messy way people do. Ben and I have not spoken since that night. I heard through the brittle grapevine that he confronted Richard, that there was a massive, ugly blow-up, that Ben moved out of the city. My mother and I are in a fragile, painful process of rebuilding. Some days, the anger at her and my father is all-consuming. Other days, I just miss my dad, the only father ill ever know, and I cry for the unimaginable burden he carried. I think of Ben every day. The love didn't just switch off. It had nowhere to go, so it curdled into a permanent, aching sadness in the center of my chest. I'm not the woman I was on the floor of my childhood room. That woman, full of hopeful, simple love, is gone. I am someone else now. Someone who knows that the past is never really past, that it waits in dusty boxes, and that the truth, however devastating, is the only ground solid enough to build a future on, even if that future is one you have to walk alone. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It's the first time I've really told it, start to finish, even if it's just to a camera and to all of you. If you've ever faced a truth that changed everything, or had to make a choice that broke your own heart, I see you. Please share your own stories of resilience in the comments below. Your experiences help others feel less alone. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more real, raw stories about love, family, and the secrets that shape us. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for more horror stories.